Needless to say, I've been pretty excited talking to you. I've known you for a couple of years now, not only as a colleague, but you were a tremendous leader working together. And I think a lot of people can learn from you, and not only as a leader, but just as someone in the industry. Take a look at your LinkedIn profile. You've been in the life science industry for a long time now, since school, pretty much having a science degree in school. But you and I are similar in that way. We've had our vision in this industry. You probably a little bit more strong-handed than me. I just kind of accidentally fell into this one. But obviously working for big companies like Miltenny, GE Healthcare, Millipore, and most recently obviously Biotech, I think a lot of people could learn tremendously from your experience.
It's a pleasure to be here and connect. I'm really proud of what North Star is doing, a sales agency, which I think is great. You and I both think of the same way. We have this tremendous skill set. We were able to help our former employers and things that we've worked with over the years. But now you can take and pivot that and use that skill for your own enablement, building your own company and helping connect customers, right, with the right ideas, the right products, the right resources. So I think it's a thrill to be able to talk here. And you talk about your journey, right? From when I was in junior high, like I knew I liked science from way back then. It came to me naturally, and then initially wanting to go into med school, but then just later realizing that the main reason I wanted to be a doctor was to be able to tell people what's going on with them, to really help them understand the implications, make better informed decision. So I just started to get clarity around that. I really was drawn to people, right? Like helping people.
Mm-hmm.
And, being in science, working on the bench and then making the transition to a commercial sales role, but definitely being still a very technical person and not just only the business side of it, realizing that people do matter. I think my hashtag that I use sometimes on LinkedIn is people make the difference, right? And so during that journey, if you can have a outstanding message that impacts and benefits humanity, and you can bring people along with you in that journey, I think that's a blessing.
Yes, you nailed it. That's the one thing where I want to highlight with people with this industry is that you're actually contributing, albeit a small part, to better humanity. And for you, what struck me with you, Brenda, is that it's hard to find someone that has mastered the sort of sales skills and soft skills around sales, but also the technical knowledge, right, with the role. And I think you mastered both pretty much perfectly. That's what always struck me with you. Normally you would find someone super technical and you have the salesperson to talk superficially and you got the field app to come in and talk the talk, but you had both, which is like pretty
Yeah,
rare.
I think I was fortunate too. During my tenure at Millipore, I had opportunity to serve as a FAS, right? As a stem cell FAS. And so that kind of reinforced that solid foundation I already had in like, immunology, microbiology, chemistry. And then so that really like came to life. And then taking that viewpoint of what the FAS does and applying that with sales, trying to help the customer reach a solution, right? Like de-risking their decision-making process. Because oftentimes I used to, tell the team is that we deal with people, right? And by human nature, people sometimes try to avoid risk. You're trying to overcome inertia. And just like the same way you get motivated to say, I'm going to finally go to the gym or I'm going to finally clean out my garage, right? It's being able to help them see how their lives will be better impacted with that decision. And like you said, with humanity, what we're doing, I mean, even if you're selling a product that's fairly upstream early discovery, for example, like, just initial screening, 10 to 15 years from now, maybe one of those targets or compounds or molecules can become a therapeutic, right? That either extends a grandparent's life or allows a mom to have a baby or whatever that may be.
Yeah, we're absolutely blessed to be in this industry. Now, you've been similar to myself in the industry for over 20 years. What have you noticed in terms of culture change working at these large companies from back when you started to now?
That's an excellent question. I think when I first got into sales, the tools in which you use to do your day-to-day job has changed tremendously. Not to date myself, but I remember having a Palm Pilot, right? I remember printing
Yeah.
out all my maps before I left the house to go to an appointment.
Yes.
Or if I lost my maps, I have a story, true story. I'm driving in California, like on La Cienega, trying to go to USC or someplace, and the papers fly out the window. And so but I had the tabs open on my laptop, and each tab basically directed me right. Well, if you leave this location, this is where you're going next. So I think companies nowadays empower their people with a lot more resources because I think they fully appreciate that time is of the essence. And if your people are stuck with using antiquated systems, antiquated processes, then that's less time that they have out there to be helping customers. So a lot of companies that are smart, they make the big bets on providing their team with the tools. But also what has changed too a lot is the customer perspective, the customer journey in the last 20 years. Customers are much more knowledgeable. They have a lot more information readily accessible to them. They can weigh cons and pros. Even on ChatGPT, you can ask, hey, if I'm interested in this technology, how does this impact me? But what all of these technologies cannot replace is the people portion of it, right? That trusting, building confidence, having a rapport, knowing that as a sales or commercial person, that even sometimes you may put your own personal interests aside for what is the benefit of the customer. You should always do that, right? As a salesperson, like what's the best solution for the customer? And sometimes when you're talking to them, they might not have an immediate need for your solution. Maybe it's a year from now, maybe it's 6 years from now. But really being able to understand their business, right? I think that's very accessible to a sales professional these days, too.
Where do you see the role of a sales rep going in the future now that AI is upon us?
Yeah.
I'm just fascinated by that question and I'd love to know your thoughts. I'm talking like 10, 15 years in the future, right?
Yeah, when you
Yeah.
think about all these large language models that are out there available, and even, as companies start to adopt AI in either their R&D or just, refining their processes, I think as a salesperson, people that have strong EQ and IQ will always be in position, right? If you're kind of been the salesperson who's made it, but not really at the top of your game, if you're like kind of in that B, C category sales professional, you may find yourself reinventing the wheel with either more of a supportive role as opposed to like more direct customer facing because customers can be prepared, right? When they come in and have meetings, they can ask you and know information about your top competitors, what's out there in the market, what people are saying. But if you don't understand the science, you don't have a good grasp of people skills and understanding their motivation and what is going to be perceived as a win for them, you may struggle a little bit more. I think the larger companies, they often have strong, significant training programs to invest in their people and as the market changes and adopts. So you remember, Pat, both you and I, when COVID happened, right? It was like an immediate pivot overnight. We went to using Teams and using all these online mediums to have, personal relationships. And it worked. It was successful. Customers adapted. They joined us in this process. So much to the point that when the world opened back up, people were like, oh no, let's just meet online.
I'm good. Yeah. I'm good seeing you on the screen. Yeah, exactly. But you know what? I have a slightly different take on
Okay.
that because I think right now, I think it's reached the peak of human intelligence. And, it's not a far stretch to say that at some point, very soon, it's going to exponentially become even more intelligent than any human ever,
That is
right?
true. That is
And
possible.
so, in terms of 10 years from now, like you're looking at me now, but I can be an AI and I could be trained with all the applications in the world and all the history of how developments came about. And who knows, even EQ, right? Even EQ, you could train an AI to maybe pick up certain, even better than a human, like body language,
Yep.
signals, tone. It's weird now. Like if you knew that I was an AI right now, you'd be weirded out. But 10 years from now, maybe that'd be the total norm. It's like, okay, I'm talking to an AI just to get what I want. And then boom, I'm in and out, ask my questions, deliver all the right answers. So, what are your thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
that's so interesting you bring that up. So I was interfacing with ChatGPT the other day, and I was doing some investment kind of stuff, with all that's been going on in the market. And so I was just asking for a perspective, and I was just talking to it a little bit like a person. I was like, "Well, what do you think? You
Yeah.
advise, would you recommend?" And giving it context, of course. So maybe 2 years ago, I came across an interesting article on LinkedIn that actually spoke to that very fact that 10, 15 years from now, you might not need salespeople or they'd be greatly reduced. And at first I was like, no. But then I thought, okay, well, I'll be retired, so it won't matter. But I love this profession though, right? So I would hate to see this profession, go away. But one thing we've all experienced, Pat, is that change is inevitable, right? It's a part of life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for those
Mm-hmm.
people that still desire the human interaction, there will still be a place on both the customer side and the company side. But maybe there will be some processes that get streamlined and dedicated to AI, especially more of those transactional interactions. Customer wants to buy a growth factor, protein, or antibody. You might not need a salesperson for a little $300 order, but somebody who's making $1 million purchase, they're probably still going to want to talk to a person. I mean, the day that you might see those type of interactions relegated to I don't know if that would ever come in like $1 million large big deals, but it's possible, right? It just really depends
Yeah,
on how well overall society embraces it, right? Because getting back to that human nature, right? Because the people that we deal with, our customers, our scientists, they're still people at the end of the day, right? And so depending on how
absolutely.
much they desire that interaction will dictate, the surgence of AI in the cell space.
Even now, we're getting used to calling a supplier and having AI or the automated robot help us resolve our issues just by dialing a couple of numbers, and then depending on what we dial, then they'll say this and then they'll respond this, ask a couple of questions. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah,
It's interesting. I
and so
think
like I had an issue the other day. I bought a plane ticket, and then after the ticket was purchased, I got some extra fee which wasn't in my shopping cart. So I tried the
yeah,
chatbot, and the chatbot was like not quite getting what I was saying. As and I had to repeat myself. And I think if you can make it to where a person can explain it clearly and not be too repetitive, the number of questions, people probably might adopt it more readily. But if you have to repeat yourself three, four, 5 times, the person's going to say, let me get on, with the live person so I can just say it once, ask them clearly, do you understand? And then they can, help me out.
it's not totally there yet
Yeah, well, it
for
sounds like
sure.
are you a fan of the idea? Are you pro the further expansion of AI in sales?
First of all, it's already out of the box. It's just a matter of adapting to it and embracing it, in my opinion, to do what you got to do more efficiently and be more productive
Right.
in the day to day stuff. Not only at work, but just day to day stuff, right? And so, yeah, I embrace it. There's some scary things about it, but I saw this video. There's a prominent AI person. I forgot his name now, but he said that he has this vision in the future of being on this island, but he doesn't know if he's on the island living a life of luxury and leisure, I should say, because all the AI is doing everything for him and he's just like chilling and having a good time, or he's on the island because he's hiding or running away from the AI robots that's trying to kill him. So he doesn't know what vision that is, and I think that's so true. I think a lot of people have that
Yeah, that fear.
feeling.
It's natural, right? Because it's the unknown and we just don't know, like you said, the Pandora's box is open. What is that really gonna mean for us 10, 15 years? Like, would you ever be like, Star Trek, futuristic where you're having surgery by a robot instead of a physician, right? Because
Yeah.
how do you teach a robot what the tensile strength feels like of ligament or something like that? But I'm pretty sure with neural net learning and, all those models, I'm sure it can be taught to some degree. I find myself reading more, right? So I can stay abreast of it, right?
Hmm.
And I think that is probably the best thing I would advise anyone, whether you're for it or not, you still need to be able to understand what this new evolution will look like. Since we're in the life sciences, healthcare diagnostic space, It could even lend itself to a lot more self-diagnosing, right? You could you imagine maybe one day you go to the doctor's office and you can select a menu of different tests that you want, different biomarkers you want, and then you could have some input your lifestyle, like really detailed, because your doctor only has 15, 20 minutes. But imagine if you had a program that you could spend an hour and you could talk about how much you walk, how much you exercise, how often does your blood pressure go up or go down, or how well do you sleep, how well do you excrete waste, right? And then once you put in that information in your family history, as you continue to scour papers and put that information from PubMed and other scientific journals, you might be able to come up with a more detailed information, especially in the earlier predictive phase of healthcare, which I think is what a lot of people want, right? Because we're all living longer, but no one wants to live long with the chronic disease, right? If you could find out you were susceptible to something in your 30s or 40s and make significant lifestyle changes, that might enhance your overall living.
Exactly. Quality of life versus extension of life. Absolutely. And that's the really exciting part about our industry now in AI is exactly what you said, finding cures faster, diagnosing faster. They said the future is going to be all wearables, right? And that's able to, whether it's a shirt or a watch, that's able to analyze your biomarkers, biometrics in your blood and recommend food for you
Yeah.
for that day.
You were just
You
stressed. Need
know?
some magnesium now.
Or a glass of wine.
That too, Pat. That too.
Obviously, you and I have been in sales leadership roles. And I got to ask you this question in terms of, you and I are obviously minorities in what we did in the group of who we hung out with. Fascinating to gather your thoughts on that. Were you conscious about that? And did you think that, hey, this is a big deal? How did you wrestle with that? Or did you wrestle at all with that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think in my very early career, I was fortunate to work with a company that had quite a bit of diversity in the sales side, right? So not only African American, Hispanic, Middle Eastern, Asian, just Asian population, very diverse. And so I thought like more companies were like that. But as I grew and progressed, not all companies, I won't say embrace, but have that approach to, even though they're hiring the best, there's still a mixed pool, right? So I feel like for you and I, we were trying to be catalysts, Biotechny, to try and encourage that diversity in color or background is equally important as diversity in thought, right? Because let's say we both are raised in the South, we still might have different experiences, or we're both raised in Canada, we still might have unique experiences. So trying to have the diversity of ideas is important to me. And then obviously some cultural diversity is critical too, because that really helps you connect with human beings, because if you can't connect with people, you can't really have empathy. And what we do is important to be able to display empathy.
My experience is the same as yours in terms of account managers, sales reps. There was more diversity there, but I think as soon as you broke the ceiling and went into sales leadership, manager, director roles, diversity wasn't as much, right?
No,
And do you think companies are doing enough?
I feel like there should be more an encouragement of that. You can create an environment, because if you're at a certain level and you aspire to ascend and you look and say, there's no one that may mirror or reflect uh, who I am as an individual, or some facets of me, right? And then, there's always that, are they going to fully understand me? Are they going to fully embrace me? Right? Are they going to really be a champion of me? Because I think finding that executive champion is important, and you have to find an executive champion who values diversity and really, believes in that and is committed to it wholeheartedly, not just in words, but in action too.
Action,
And
yeah.
then for people
Hmm.
like you and I, as we move and come along, how do we do the same? How do we then take that torch and pass it, the baton on to that next generation of, people that are aspiring to move up through the ranks. And so I was
Hmm.
fortunate where I've had people not only within the company, but externally outside of the company approach me and say, I want to mentor or foster, learning a little bit more. And so what I've done is some volunteering with women in bio and tried to, obviously maybe find that next young African American woman who's wanting to move from being a salesperson into sales leadership, or even moving up beyond like even a regional sales manager and aspire to go higher. They're out there, right? I think we are out there, Pat, right? We would just have to look and be willing that,
Yeah.
hey, making the revenue, making the numbers equally important to you and I. We still have our own commitments in our personal lives that we need to be able to support ourselves. But I think when you can look at a table and round it out and you can see the world reflected back at you, that's a good thing, right? Because the world is a unique mixing bowl of so many experiences. And if your boardroom only reflects one slant, you're missing out.
There's that famous picture was a couple of years ago where Congress got together, or I'm not sure what group in the White House, but they were discussing healthcare for the country, and in that room, all you saw was like white old men.
Exactly. So
It's like
somebody
it's
has
just
their
doesn't make sense.
lab that's out there that's being impacted. Somebody has their nana, their papa, and they're all of different heritage. And if you're selling
It's really
or
important.
enabling healthcare and the people who make the decisions only have one viewpoint, then how can you
Clueless.
understand that people are going to?
And to be honest, I kind of felt like that too in certain companies when I was at meetings.
It's hard not
And so it's, I
to, right?
think you,
Like if you go to
yeah.
if you go to church or you go to a football game, let's use a sporting event. Everybody's there at a sporting event. You're all colors, all ethnicities, but sometimes you might go to church and you're just like, it's a little bit segregated. Companies should not be like church, right? You should go to church and
Hmm.
everybody's in there. Or if you go to,
Yeah,
you go to yoga
I agree.
studio, everybody in there should have some mix, right? I mean, that's my feeling. I don't know how do you overcome that? And that's one that takes a lot of work. And it's a little bit of vulnerability too, right? To be able to admit that, hey, this is important to me, and be able to say it in a way that you don't feel like you're going to be judged for bringing this up even. And if you're the person that's hearing that and receiving that information, then try to be empathetic and put yourself, how would I feel if the shoe were on in reverse, if I was the only person and the whole other room was full of everyone else? And so you have to think about it that way. And if you can't quite do that, maybe it's opportunity for you to go back and really lean into being even more empathetic, perhaps.
That's why I want to bring this up because you and I are in a unique position to talk about this and have these feelings because guaranteed 90% of people in those boardrooms do not have this feeling. Did you have a sense of responsibility or you need to represent,
So I
when
had
you're
a
at these
sense of
meetings?
responsibility because you feel like maybe you don't want people to form a negative opinion and you want to show that there's a
Mm,
range here, right? That to some degree. And if that's a trap, sometimes you can fall in because who am I to say what this person has experienced or what they know, right?
mm.
I don't know for certain if they've interacted with people who might look like me outside of work or within work a lot. So it's a bit of a fine line, but trying to do your job well, right? Let that speak for you first to open up the door. Because if you're not doing your job well, Pat, we all know nobody's going to listen to what you have to say. But doing that first, but then when it's time to talk about hiring or getting visibility to someone, or they're on the fast track, how do you fast track someone? And you do that. So I think it is a combination of someone being responsible. Like, for example, me and my journey, I was the only, African American woman that had reached that level. So, of
Hmm.
course, when I'm hiring the best people, but I'm also still trying to look for talent that is diverse and bring that on. During my career, I've been happy to hire a person of Hispanic heritage, person who was Black, and of course, Caucasian people as well, without a doubt, but
Sure.
who are still good, who are still solid talent, top performers. That's at least been my approach.
I have the same approach as well. And that's how I think how we can change is changing ourselves just by inclusive and hiring the
Absolutely,
people.
absolutely, because
Uh,
where someone may originate from in the world does not exclude them from bringing all the traits to the table that you need in a particular role. Coachable,
yeah.
malleable, right? Inquisitive, right? If the person possesses all of those, and I think that's probably maybe where people, maybe the unconscious bias may creep in a little bit, because if you got two candidates of equal strength and one is kind of like, well, we play golf or we play tennis, you just may lean a little bit more towards your personal preferences. I don't begrudge people that, but I don't know quite how to overcome that, right? Like, how do you say, you know what? I'm going to go in this direction because this person is maybe not 100% like me. They're talented, they're gifted, and I have opportunity to learn something new in the world that I might not have if I just go with what I've always had.
Most people, unfortunately, like comfort, like what's familiar, right? And it takes people like you and I, and hopefully many others as time goes on, to realize I'm going to step outside my box and bring on the team someone that has a complete opposite opinion of me. That's
Yeah,
good. That's a good thing,
absolutely. Yeah, the diversity
Yeah.
of thought is important because a kind of authoritarian approach to leadership, yeah, it can get the job done. But at the same token, most people do their best work when they're inspired, when they're empowered, when they're motivated. Now, you can't control the internal clocks, and that's what you have to look for when you're hiring or you're working and collaborating with people, like what's their own internal mechanism. But aside from that, everything else can kind of be addressed or coached to some degree. Even if somebody doesn't quite have the skill, you can grow somebody in the skill set, especially if they have the right motivation. But yeah, I think, even if you tie that back into science, right? Like, how do those decisions impact healthcare disparity? Like with clinical trials, right? When you're selecting a group of cohorts, does the group of cohorts actively reflect the society or your target base for your gene therapy? Now, some diseases disproportionately affect others, right? Where there's like sickle
hmm
cell
hmm
anemia, perhaps, may, disproportionately affect African Americans. But that being the case, though, when you're talking about cancer, the big C word, which is near and dear to all of us, because every last single one of us has had a friend, a loved one, a coworker get disease, pass away. And then we've also had those who've gotten a disease and survived, right? And so if we can make those therapeutics be a better reflection of the society at large, I think ultimately society wins.
Humanity wins.
Yeah,
All right, well, Brinia, just wanted to know, what is your next chapter in your illustrious career so far?
that's a great question, Pat. I mean, ultimately for me, I've learned a lot. I've grown and progressed kind of in a linear fashion, but I'm also realizing that I thrive by learning and embracing new ideas. And so I'm wanting to carve out a space for me where maybe I'm open to more diagnostics realm, or getting a little bit even closer towards helping the patient, right? I thrived in the upstream early proteomics field, but moving either transition a little bit further downstream or even companion diagnostics would be a way to like kind of see these therapies really coming to fruition, like at the end, like you've crossed the threshold, there's a product that's commercially available, it's been a long arduous path, but yay, here we're seeing patients get treated, here's the results, here's the promising reward for that. So it's something along those lines, but it's definitely going to be involving mentoring and leading and coaching. I enjoy that. One of the best things that I was thrilled about, if somebody comes to me with a problem and I can listen intently to what they're struggling with, create a space where they can express themselves. Because sometimes people just need a vent, and then they can go out and resolve the problem
Hmm.
themselves. If you know that you have support, you have a wingman in your corner, so to speak, then being able, when they come back and tell you they took that advice, they implemented it, put it in their own path, and they got a great result. That's the reward for me. And then, of course, the revenue and the processes that you need to put in place, those come along with it. So it could even be something along the lines of like consulting, like with Deloitte or, Accenture, something with a global capacity where I can just connect more of those dots. I'm interested in things like that.
That is spoken like a true leader, Berendia, for sure. And I love the fact that you're not afraid to get outside the box, try something new, and learn, right? That's the whole point of the journey. Because you could easily, like a lot of people, just step right back into what you've been doing and go on your
Yeah.
merry way. But I
Oh,
like the fact that,
you could continue along the same path, but I feel like, you know, Forrest Gump, life is like a box of chocolates, right? You never know what you're gonna get. But when you open it up and join the journey of sampling and figuring out what you like and which combinations work best for you. So me, I'm drawn to building and I'm drawn to bringing people along in that journey in that and get my hands dirty, getting in the trenches. I always aspire to not be the type of leader that says you go do this and then I myself don't live by that same motto. So if you're working hard, best believe I'm right there working hard right along with you.
got to be in the trenches with your team.
Yep. I think that's probably the hard part as you move further up, moving from being a territory manager, sales manager, senior sales manager, director. You get moved further away from the customers sometimes, and you have to collect the information secondhand, the third party. So when you're out in the field, it was always a treat for me to be like, hey, great, I'm meeting customers today. Because you're in leadership, you have a larger picture of what's going on throughout the organization. And so you hear something from a customer and you can say, oh, well, there's an initiative or effort in this portion of the business. I can connect those dots. I think the main thing is being able to be passionate about what I'm doing, enjoy the people that are around me, hopefully share some inspiration, accomplish some great things together, and hopefully move a few mountains and make an impact on the world.
Wow. That is a great message for anyone out there, period. Not even in our industry, just period. And I think we'll leave it at that with that hopeful message.